just joining us. Thank you for being patient. Just had a few connection problems, and you're listening live to the Angel Rock. I'm your host, Lorilei Potvin. I have a very, very special guest tonight. Before we get started, just want to remind you we do have a chat room on the UPRN radio network, which I should have mentioned where we are. You can also watch us on the UPRN YouTube channel, or you can listen to us live on the uprntalkradio.com website. So please feel free to join in. And if you do join in on the UPRN YouTube chat room, I know I can see that one, and I'll try and if you got any questions for us. But let me get to my special guest. He's also a very, very good friend of mine. His name is Chip Reichenthal. I'm going to read his very wonderful bio to you all because he's quite experienced in a lot of areas. We're going to be talking about all kinds of great things tonight. So Chip Reichenthal is a published author, lecturer, and radio host who's been fascinated with afterlife sciences since seeing and speaking with his best friend at the moment of the friend's death in 1979. Since Chip has spent more than 3 decades exploring areas of paranormal, metaphysical, and psychological aspects of afterlife science and theory. Ultimately, Chip hopes to highlight the positive and loving sides of potential communication with discarnate energies or spirit, especially examining the role of accurate historical research, theoretical physics, belief systems, mind over matter, and consciousness as an energy form. He has had success as a spirit medium, and he's quite good at it, and great aptitude in paranormal investigations, hypnotherapy, and an excellent grasp of tarot. And I can attest to that. He gave me a fantastic reading not too long ago. Chip has hosted radio shows on 6 different networks, appeared in films, and hosted or worked with many of the greatest minds and talents in paranormal, parapsychology, metaphysics, and physics. Chip has a book currently available, a fiction novel with a real-life first-person perspective of mediumship entitled Even the Dead Don't Tell You the Truth. There is a website. I'll let you read it, Chip, because I'll probably screwed up when I finish this.
Okay.
Chip also hosts a radio show currently that airs on 2 networks called Kindness Beyond the Veil, and one of them is he can be found here on Saturday afternoons.
Yes, I can.
Yes, and so welcome, Chip. You can tell them what time your show is on. It's
Okay.
a fantastic show.
Yeah, thank you, Lorilei. It's such a thrill to be here with you. It's kind of a full circle thing. I've had the honor of having you on my show a couple of times, and yes, the show is here on UPRN Saturday afternoons, right around 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern. I guess that's 1 to 3 Central, right?
Yeah.
And yes, Kindness Beyond the Veil. We take a kinder look at paranormal, metaphysics, spiritual, extraterrestrial, supernatural realms, and just to show that even in life where there's a love-based side of things and there's a fear-based side of things, the same can apply even in the darkest of places.
That's true. And you had your show on your other network tonight, and I'm gonna out you tonight right now. You had your early birthday present. Your birthday's coming up on the 26th, so happy early birthday.
Thank you.
One of my go-to, especially in the beginning, spiritual teachers and mentors. You had Teal Swan tonight. Did you know it? How did that go?
Oh, it was fantastic. It's her 3rd visit to Kindness Beyond the Veil. I believe we did it this time Monday, but that episode will air this coming Saturday.
Yes.
Right between 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern. It's an honor to be on this. I love UPRN myself.
I love it too. And actually, I'm going to tell our listeners, actually, Chip connected me with Joe, our owner of the station, Joe Montaldo. I want to thank him too for giving me these few hours to spend with the rest of you listening to us. And Chip kind of connected us. I had Joe on my friends list, but I've been on a radio for a little bit, and I'm so glad to call UPRN my home. So thank you so much. And thank you for all of you that are listening and joining us. If you do have any questions for us as we get talking, and Chip and I can talk forever. We do it lots of times without Skype.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Skype or no Skype, man. Yeah, conversation flows. Yeah.
Well, we always the thing about the angel rock, I said, and the way I've written it down, I'm going to read this so I don't screw it up because it's kind of hard to describe my show because it's really a spectrum of the paranormal. But I consider what I do, being a psychic medium, crystal Reiki, energy healer, medical intuitive, soon to be Akashic record reader, and I also have a lot of experience with darker paranormal. I've mentioned before to our listeners that we've been on Paranormal Survivor season 4, episode 9 that just went by.
Yep,
So
you go,
I do
girl.
a whole spectrum. So actually, we worked on this. The Dell and I, as some of you have heard, he's my hubby. He hasn't been on the show yet, but he will be. And we basically said this show presents an illuminating, positive perspective, removing some of the shadow and mystery on all things within the paranormal spectrum. Because I consider even what I do, working with the archangelic realm, working with spirit guides and that kind of stuff, crystals, I still consider that paranormal. Because if we look at the definition, right, of what the paranormal is.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely. So I got to ask you, Chip, were you able to give a tarot reading tonight?
No, not tonight, but
No?
there is one coming. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely one. And we had a nice talk after the show, you know. I wanted to fill in some extra stuff with regard to the angel rock because, you know, I've known you for a long time. And
Yes.
look, I'm going to use my resume card to qualify this. Because officially, actually, Wednesday will be the 40th year anniversary of when my childhood best friend came to me at the moment of his death.
Wow.
So that'll be now 40 years into these realms. And I've had, I think, 5 different radio shows. Kindness Beyond the Veil will celebrate its 2nd year anniversary in September.
Congratulations.
Yeah. We just had our 92nd show with Teal Swan, which will be on here Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
Please check that out. It was really good.
For sure.
But I worked with a lot of psychics, different kinds of psychics, different kinds of, you know, some of the greatest minds in all these realms. I think very seriously, and I will say it out loud, you know, if I feel like I need some real solid advice, you know, from somebody very gifted that I know I can count on, Lorilei is my go-to.
Yes, he does tell people that. Yes, he does. Yeah. Thank you. I feel deeply honored. Thank you. Well,
I think your insight is tremendous, and I just wanted to add that spirit to the listenership because I just, it's, you know, you're my go-to. I mean, you're the one that comes to mind first, and that says a lot because I've worked with.
It does. Yeah, you do this yourself, so I really appreciate when you do that. I want to get back into something you said, though.
Okay.
For some of our listeners, because my show's new, this is only my 2nd one in the network, but you mentioned it's going to be the 40th year anniversary of when your good friend passed. And again, I'm so sorry. That was a sad situation would happen. But what I want to ask you is, and I know the answer, but for our listeners,
sure.
Did you ever have any indication with any kind of abilities before this happened, or would you be comfortable sharing how that kind of happened for you? You said your friend appeared to you after he had passed, and
no, this was just before my 21st birthday. I think it was the eve of the eve, so that would be the 24th, which is Wednesday now. That'll make it the 40th year. It was really my, you know, I've read about that stuff, and I had my, you know, famous monsters of filmland and man, myth, and magic from Time Life and all that stuff. And, you know, I kind of had this fascination in the occult because it was different. You know, I like things that were different, but no sensitivities whatsoever. This completely caught me by surprise, you could say, but it didn't feel like it would. All right, I'll set it up.
Okay, good.
Stephen, my really first soulmate in life, you know, and I was too young to realize that, but we moved into our neighborhood when I was 2. Stephen lived next door, you know, and because he was next door and because we kind of connected so immediately, you know, we were always together like twins, you know. We were the 2 guys that had long hair in our sophomore year and said,
right, you know, on.
Yeah. Wore it with pride. And it's just, you know, we never really competed. It didn't matter who had more stuff or who was better at kickball or any of that stuff. never, had a couple of arguments, but never any fights. The worst fight that we ever had, it wasn't physical, but we saw a UFO right in the middle of this massive argument.
Too.
Yeah, right. And we both just looked, and it looked exactly like the ship on Lost in Space, which was kind of an old show now, but it was in prime time at that time. It was new, relatively new, maybe in its 4th season or something. Looked exactly like it, had the colored lights underneath and that. But needless to say, it put that argument right to bed, and sure made it memorable as probably the most heated argument we had. I don't even remember what it was,
Did he not believe it was a UFO and you did, or vice versa? Is that what the argument was about, or
the argument was about, I don't know, playing with some toy of some kind.
Oh,
something.
Gotcha.
We were 11, so it was kind of like that, who was gonna hit the ball first or whatever.
Oh, I hear you. Okay.
And it was just the day it was hot. We were just irritated in general, and it was just a good day for it. Yeah, it wasn't personal or anything, and they.
No, I thought you meant you had an argument about the UFO.
No.
Okay, so now past, he was quite young, wasn't he? Like he was in his late teens, wasn't he, or early 20s?
Yeah, well, he was 6 months older than I. His birthday was on January 4th.
Okay.
And we were always very well of each other's birthdays, and so yeah, he was 21 at that time. I'd gone to college in Florida, University of Miami, Actually, I went there for psychology. I took it very seriously. I went to the graduate library every night, because that 101, 102 stuff was just not doing it. And I had a family relative who was schizophrenic, and I, in essence, went there to cure her. And while I was down there, Steve was in upstate New York, saying, gee, I wish I could be in Miami.
Yeah, I bet.
Eventually, when I came home, he went down. It was near Miami. I think it was the Dade Broward area, but he started building boats. He found these people that he really liked, and they were building boats together. And I think it was the happiest he'd ever been in his life. He was always really independent. He ran away from home a bunch of times, not because it was a broken home or anything, but just because he wanted the sense of freedom to make his own decisions about things,
So what happened to him, Chip? Did he get in an accident?
He did, yeah. He was on a motorcycle. A drunk driver had run a red light. He was a Lincoln Continental, of all things, and I guess just didn't see him. And he was forced into that car, pretty much head on. I mean, with his head. And so he was brain dead when he got to the hospital, right? And this was and I considered myself fortunate to almost be 21 and have this be my first experience with the death of somebody close to me, but about as close as you could get without him.
Yeah, but I remember, didn't he appear to you like you hadn't even gotten a phone call yet? Is that what had happened when you found out when he had passed? Yeah.
Well, this was, he was there it was like a couple of weeks, and it's for the first experience of the loss of somebody so close, you can't kind of literally grieve him because he's not dead, but you can't not grieve him because he might as well be,
So this is while he was in the comatose state. Then was he visiting you?
No. It was, and I had 2 jobs. I was working a lot, so this particular night was my night to try to process all this. And yeah, it was like the eve of my birthday, I think, and. So I got a Colt 45. I mean, that's just the best stuff. Yeah, not too much and not enough. I mean, it's just like the perfect buzz. And I just tried to figure out a way to process all this, and how should I feel about somebody who's basically dead but not dead. And
so that's what I meant in the coma. Sorry, I'm not using the right word. So he was brain dead then clinically, but he was still being kept alive, say by a ventilator or whatever.
By ventilators, yeah.
There's a reason why I'm asking you. Once you get a little further into the story, there's a reason why I'm asking you, but carry on. So he hadn't been declared legally dead yet.
No,
he just was brain dead. Okay, got you. And he was visiting you.
It was that particular evening. I was on a swing set in my parents' backyard. It's kind of distant from everything. Great place for Colt 45. And as the evening went on, there was this energy that kind of appeared next to me on the swing next to me. I'd never seen, encountered, or experienced anything like that before. And it was oddly not creeped out by it. There was something about it that did not feel threatening. I was more curious or even fascinated than, off guard.
Yeah.
And there was just this feeling that I should ask this something. It was kind of like that Predator movie where that thing is there but not there at the same time, kind of a silhouette of it, if you will, or how heat rises on a hot day where you could see that, but it was kind of in the shape of a person, if you will.
Yeah.
And I had enough of that beer in me where I was relaxed enough to just kind of go with it. And it's like, is somebody there? And it answered me. But it wasn't out loud, it was in my head. But it was in a way where if it were somebody physical who was physically speaking to me, it would be just as real, Yeah. And I wasn't put off by that, mainly because of the conversation. He said, Chip, it's me, it's Steve, And I'm like, Steve, man, what's going on?
How did you not think you were going crazy or something? You've never had this experience, or was it because of what you felt?
I didn't really have time to go there in my mind. Okay. I was just so fascinated by what was going on that I didn't question it. I just kind of went with it. Because look, in that 2 weeks that he was artificially alive, if you will, I had so many conversations with him in my head. This is my best friend through childhood. My first soulmate. I mean, what do you say?
Like brothers.
But when I had these conversations in my head, it was me speaking in his voice as him, because it was in my head, But here it was different, and he said something in that conversation that I never would have even thought of to say, and and again, thrown off, but not disconcerted. I was just fascinated. And he said, well, I know you got a birthday coming up, so I wanted to wish you a happy birthday. But he said, but I came for your blessing. And I said, my blessing? And he says, yeah, I want to die. And, what?
That's a lot to put on anybody's shoulders, never mind the age and this happening for the first time.
Well, it was the guttural instinct. No, man, hang in there. They'll fix you. Science will figure out something. Stronger survive. All that stuff. And he's like, no, there's nothing they can do. And he said, put yourself in my shoe. I'm lying here. I can't think. I can't eat. They're feeding me through tubes, and my arms and stuff. And they clean up after me after I go to the bathroom, they bathe me. I'm just lying there. All my life I wanted freedom and independence, and I can't have any of that. And there are worse things than death. So I came for your blessing to die. And, and because he put it in his perspective in my shoes, so I could understand, on that kind of level, what he's thinking and feeling, that's when it really kind of hit, and made sense and touched me, And I realized, oh my God, it's Stephen. And I said, no, I get it. No, I understand that. No, you're right. I did try to continue to talk about it one more time, but
sure.
But eventually, after he put it that way, and I said, look, I love you, man. I love what's best for you, and I understand, especially, how you're feeling in this situation. That you're right. Maybe you could come visit. After. We both kind of laughed, and he said he would try. Yeah. But he basically thank me like from the bottom of his heart for my blessing to him. And again, wish me a happy birthday. And that energy just vanished. And it was just the swing next to me as it had been my entire life, just a swing next to me. And boy, I wallowed in that for a little while. And none of it creeped me out. None of it freaked me out. None of it felt wrong. It felt, from the soul out. Beautiful,
Well, I can say that because for our listeners, I probably mentioned it last week, but I'm also a registered nurse, and I worked a lot in the hospital. I've worked in ICU. I've worked in the NICU with little ones. I've worked in community and palliative care. So I've been around a lot of death and dying. And I have said many, many times, and don't get me wrong, I cherish life. I really do. And I mean, even being a medium, I can speak to people in the afterlife. But I will tell you, sometimes it is kind of what we do for our animals when they are ill and they know it's time. And what we have to put human beings through sometimes to, till they naturally pass. And if you're young and you're healthy, and you got a good heart, you got a good set of lungs, it can go on a long time sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was kept alive until his parents ultimately had to do the worst task of their lives. Fly across the country and unplug him. And the irony is that his parents never knew what I knew. That they gave him exactly what he wanted to do. They were very traditional in their faith. They wouldn't hear any of it. But the thing is, I wallowed in that after that energy on the swing next to me disappeared. And 10 minutes later, my mother comes out of the house. By this time, it's like 3 a.m. I have known my mother all my life. She's not up at 3 a.m. ever, and coming outside to the swing, no less. I'm thinking, what's up with that, And she said, Stephen's parents just called. They pulled the plug on him about 10 minutes ago. They wanted you to be the first to know. And in that very moment, I realized that I had an audience with my childhood best friend, my first soulmate in life, at the very moment of his death. And he left with my blessing, and but that's not what people said death was. Nobody said death was like that. Nobody said that was possible. Nobody said that would happen. I couldn't tell my parents about it. I couldn't tell my friends about it. Couldn't tell the kids in school, church, I mean, you couldn't talk about that stuff. This was 1970.
You still can't. You still can't a lot.
Well, I can't. I do it kind of for a living now.
No, but even where you're someone who worked with death quite a bit, I've hurt my back, so I'm not in active nursing anymore. I still have my license, but the things you see, like I'm actually writing 3 books, and I've talked to you about it before, Chip, and I know I have, but one of them is going to be my youngest son is severely autistic. And I know none of these subjects sound like they go together, but they kind of do. We're going to share our story, what we've gone through with my son, because he was diagnosed very, very young. And I always say, unless you live it yourself, you don't really pay attention to. It's human nature. We're too busy, but we live it every day. And I know 35 years ago, it was 1 in 10,000 boys being born diagnosed. Now, depending on where you live geographically, globally, it's 1 in 48 to 1 in 52 boys being born. So, there's a lot of people with newly diagnosed children. The girls are diagnosed as well, too, but it's boys 3 times more often than girls. And so by sharing our story, it's going to be kind of a place like, where do I go for support? Where do I, how do I know, like things like IEPs that you would need for school and things like that. Then our second book that I'm writing right now is about a paranormal experience. Again, it's going to be the kind of book that I wish I could have found when we first started going through all this paranormal. I've said this to you many times. I know I have. I never looked for the paranormal. The paranormal found me.
Yeah, I think that's what happens with everybody that's in it. People don't wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to go hunting for ghosts. Ghosts find them, or somebody they know, or somebody they love, and intrigue either their fear or curiosity. 99% of the people come from a place where it freaked them out, and they're in it to face their fear.
It didn't freak me out. It was just, especially where I live geographically and not having any knowledge of this stuff. I mean, it was a full-time job. It served me well in life now with the knowledge I've gained from it, but just kind of a self-help thing about how do you know, like, how to deal maybe with something. Can we deal with this on our own? Or if I'm connecting with a team, what am I looking for maybe that might best serve me well, or the objective, things like that. And then the last book, the reason why I brought these up is connecting with especially nurses, but first responders, that when they've been there at the time of someone's passing, to share some of the beautiful, miraculous, amazing things we witness when we see this so often. So,
yeah, my sister did that. She, not as a nurse, but in hospice. She was a grief counselor. It was ironic because that was right around the time that I was kind of tied into mediumship. There were about 7 years where I just had this zone for some reason, and ultimately I kind of let it go. So
you can still do it though, Chip, because I wanted to bring this up tonight, and I won't give away anything. You can kind of share what you're comfortable with.
All right.
But you can still very much see spirit, right? And I know that you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting to the point, and I am on this thing we call a path to ascension. I think it comes from meditation and trying to understand the energies that are unseen. I think in order to really get a grasp of things that you can't see, or things that are non-local, that are communicating with you somehow, or that you're seeing just randomly walking up a flight of stairs. There is something wider out there beyond our 3 dimensions, and I'm working on a way to find it. I just, for me, and because of what my friend said to me at the moment of his death, it was really my first experience of that. And I had an experience a few years later with my wife's father,
Okay.
Actually came to us as a balloon that had been, we bought it for my daughter at a fair. She was 4 at the time. It's like a state fair. And this thing had been, it's a helium balloon, but it's like 6 days old now. So it's limp and it's not going anywhere. And then one day out of nowhere, it comes out of her room. I'm home in the afternoon. I'm exhausted. I'm trying to take a nap on the couch and watch some TV. And I don't know, Jerry Springer or something.
Real high vibe TV.
Well, it was, it's what was on, But anyway, this balloon somehow comes out of my daughter's room. It's floating, not just floating. It goes all the way down this long hallway toward me. And I'm lying in the middle of the living room. 5 feet away from me is this air conditioner, which is blasting, this cool air on this hot, hot day. And it was July, I think, about a year after he died. And this balloon just stops right at my eye level. And you were just saying how, there's all sorts of things going around us, but because we're in that life thing, we're not noticing, So this thing's in my face, literally. And I just kind of, didn't even notice for a minute the oddity of the whole thing. Because it's not supposed to be floating at all. I mean, this thing is basically dead. But then it catches my attention, and I do recognize that there's something off here, But again, not in a way scary or anything, just, odd and fascinating. So I'm lying down. I go to a sitting up position, and this balloon follows me and stays at my eye level. And I'm going, okay.
And the air conditioner is blowing too.
And the air conditioner
if anything, it should be going somewhere else.
Yeah, it should be floating way the other way if it's floating at all. And that would just be the current of this air conditioner, which was on full, and blasting. And it continued, to hold its own. So I stand up, balloon follows me, stays at eye level, sit down, eye level, And at some point it just hit me, and I don't know how it hit me or why it hit me, but I realized it was my wife's dad. And I'm like, Rich. I said, that's you, right? And only if that's you, show me. And this balloon, I swear to God, nods yes, And I'm like, and that didn't freak me out. I was like, I was excited, Rich. Because he was a guy, he didn't like hospitals much, I've become that guy now.
Yeah.
And
I say hospitals are no place for sick people.
Right, yeah, I know. And we're finding all sorts of people that can help us all in fascinating ways that are actually aimed to heal you. or for you to heal yourself. There's
Mhm.
fascinating stuff out there. So I love these realms. But in this case, by the time he found out, he was in stage 4, and
Yep.
there was really nothing they could do. All he wanted to do is work. That's all he wanted to do. They wouldn't let him do that. So, bit by bit, through, taking his life and his value away, and surgery after surgery, some of which were debilitating, emasculating, horrid,
Mhm.
and just kind of shrunk down to this poor, weak guy. And here's the thing, because he'd always been the patriarch of his
Mhm.
family, you
Yeah.
know. So the last thing he wanted to do, especially because all he really had left, is to share his weaknesses with them.
Yeah.
But he could share them with me. I was still
Yeah.
family, but I'm separated enough
Yeah.
so I don't count. And
Well, I think he did count, but it was a little bit different perspective, probably, that you could see it
well,
then.
it was, yeah, I would, well, I'm easy to talk to anyway. I think, but I had a lot of love for him, I mean, the father of your love interest, it's not always an easy situation, but it always was for him. I mean, he
Mhm.
accepted me from the get-go. He was excited that, his daughter was dating me. I mean, that's the kind of guy. He's just really, like real people. He's a really
Mhm.
cool guy. But and he could tell me things about, some of the effects that he's had post-surgery, and some of the things, and all the things that he's losing, and I had his ear, and I had his back, and I would kept his secrets in silence.
But maybe
I
that's why I came to visit you in the afterlife, and he knew, probably, because I think over on the other side, not to cut you off, just wanted to add this part, is that I really believe when we're on the other side, once we actually do cross over, wherever you want to call it, a lot of people call it home.
I call
I
it
have a
crossing over. Yeah,
Well, no,
crossing
but
over.
I have a big, and we've talked about this before too, privately, but I have a
Yeah.
big interest in near-death experiences ever since I went into nursing.
Right.
And you hear people that come back that tell you the story of what's happened, and they all say they call it home, going back home.
Hmm.
So once people cross over, the beautiful thing I found is they still maintain a lot of the characteristics of who they were in this lifetime, so
A
that
lot.
we will know who they are, their name, their energy, maybe a smell about them. They were a smoker or a certain, cologne, whatever it
Smoker.
may be. Well,
Yeah.
but the thing I find that is beautiful about it is they lose some of that humanness. So say you even had somebody, for example, like one of both my grandmothers were not really lovey, fluffy bunny type women. And I remember when I first started my mediumship, somebody had one of the students had just picked up. It was one of my grandmothers. The first thing that went through my head, this is quite a few years back, it was like, what is she doing here? And then I realized literally heard her, like you said, in my head. She always adored my boys, both my sons.
Hmm.
And she was a different person because she could see perspective from both sides, and it was all from a place of love.
Well,
So, you know, to be
I've
able to
seen
hold
that
it.
too. Yeah, I've seen that too. But at the same time, and shameless plug. In my book, Even the Dead Won't Tell You the Truth, but you can
I
find
still
on
went through it.
Amazon. By the way, it's a Kindle version is available. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and from Rowe Publishing, which
Mhm.
is ROWEPUB, rowepub.com. Also,
Okay.
Even the Dead Won't Tell You the Truth. And I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but the part of the point is this central character is a spirit medium who's in a situation where he has to recognize the degree to which the dead can lie to us in communication,
Interesting.
because I think he misunderstood a message that he got that
Hmm.
could have saved somebody from a lot of trouble,
Hmm.
but seemed to almost implicate that person.
Hmm.
And so he's thinking, well, she wouldn't have done that in life. They had this,
Hmm.
they were sweethearts in high school, and their relationship was very deep, but, that was years ago. But there was never a reason that one would kill the other, or one would tell a lie that's so malicious. Let's say in life she came back and tried to get back with him, and he rejected her because he's married to somebody else,
Hmm.
and maybe part of that scorn is pushing her to really tell a lie so malicious that he'll go to prison for life, you know?
That's what this book is about.
Kind of. Well, yeah. I mean, the situation is the medium.
I'm just starting to read it, by the way, folks. So.
Are you? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. The story's about a medium whose best friend has just been charged with murder. Okay. The murder victim was his high school sweetheart. You know, they were the king and queen of the prom. Yeah. You know, they were the big deal in high school. She was the prettiest girl in town. You know, and he was the dude. You know. Girls wanted to be with him. Guys wanted to be him. You know, I mean, he was that dude. And this is my best friend. My best friend, through our relationship, never really got into that talking to the dead stuff, you know, just out of his comfort zone. So we just didn't talk about it, but we were best friends nonetheless. All of a sudden, you know, there's one day a state trooper comes to my door and asks me questions about him, you know, and they have charged him with the murder of this high school sweetheart. Yeah. And this girl hasn't even been in town for years, you know. I mean, they broke up in high school. In college, he met somebody, he married, you know. That relationship was very good, very strong. And the girl, you know, she went to a different city and was very successful there. And so she was just kind of a part of the past, really. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, you know, she's in a park murdered. The murder weapon is this wine bottle that has his fingerprints on it. Mm-hmm. So now he's charged for murder. And out of desperation, you know, now he's kind of into this talking to the dead stuff.
I bet.
And he's asked the medium to communicate with the murder victim, the high school sweetheart, to get something that alibis him, you know. And so that's basically what it is. And she doesn't come to the medium quickly. I think she's got a little, she had everything in life handed to her, basically. So I don't think she would expect her death to be that random and that malicious, that unusual, and that bad. Just didn't fit the pattern, you know. Mm-hmm. I also had communication with the dead girl's grandmother. They had this spirit connection that I knew about while she was alive. The girl is now murdered. And the grandmother I see, but I don't see the girl yet. And I'm kind of wondering why that's happening. And then I started thinking maybe it's me, you know, because I'm too emotionally tied to this thing.
Yep, got you, yep.
You know, because something about me, it's good to be very clear-headed, you know, when you have these kinds of communications, and to be as objective as possible, you know. Yeah, of course, they're sad about their situation, often angry sometimes. Sometimes they're earthbound, sometimes they're crossed over. But, you know, the thing is, like you said, they're usually themselves. So he finally sees her at one point, and the conversation goes in such a way that it seems like she's kind of implying that he actually killed her. Mm-hmm. And he just knows in his soul that that's not possible, right?
Yeah.
So he now he's starting to think, okay, so maybe she's scorned because they tried something and he rejected her and it ended up badly. But still, it wouldn't be him killing her. But it could be that she's still angry about this, you know, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Right?
But I got to ask you something. I got to stop you there.
Okay.
As a medium, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, but I find when you find behavior like that from a spirit, where there's a lot of anger, or there could be hatred, there could be jealousy, there could be all these human emotions still, they haven't quite crossed over yet. They're usually either earthbound or maybe one foot kind of heading that way. Maybe you haven't quite had the life review. Okay, good. I just wanted to hear that because, like I said, I really notice a difference between spirits that haven't crossed over and people. The one thing I'd love to point out to our listeners too, and I talk about this often when I'm doing as a spiritual teacher and mentor, that we have free will. We've had we're born with free will. We have, and I've been guilty of it myself. I said, I didn't have a choice. We always have a choice. It's just a matter of whether we want to make it or not. And the interesting thing, as I understand it, we still have free will in the afterlife. So you have the choice to cross over. And if you don't want to cross because of what your belief system is, what might be awaiting you in death, or for whatever reason, some people just don't want to leave. They love their house, or they're
Yeah.
still attached to material things.
Well, the odd thing, especially with Earthbounds, and that was kind of where I started with them. Another long story there. I don't really want to take all the time.
I want to get into some more work. We've already taken an hour here, Chip.
Have we really? Oh my Lord!
Chip and I can talk for hours.
Oh yeah, it feels like it's been like 5 minutes.
We get into these philosophical discussions and conversations, and what I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
Because we won't give any more of your book away because we want people to buy it. Because that's it. We'll leave them at the cliffhanger. What happened? Did she really tell the truth or not? And we won't say anything more.
Well, no. All I wanted to say is this medium in the book basically surveys like 200 other mediums that he knows and asks them, in their opinion, to what extent can spirit lie to us? And of course, there's always that 20% that says they're all lying. They're all evil. They're demonic. They're going to suck your life force out and push you. But you know they're there. You know, it's just part of the purpose, because that's what happened to them or somebody they know, and so that's kind of what they mirror. You know, but fear sells. I mean, all the people with the negative encounters are on TV right now. All the people
well, that's true. If you even look at, and we've talked about this at our own episode on Paranormal Survivor, everything that we said was true. I've only seen the episode twice, and we didn't know what was going in the episode. After a 6-hour interview, we didn't speak to the people that played ourselves in the recreations. We didn't speak to the psychics who commented on our episode, and we knew going into this that reality TV, is not reality TV, and that they're here to tell a story, and they want to make it spooky or the fear, like you said, sell it on the fear factor.
They're actually, but they're here to sell cereal and tampons and medicines that will give you side effects that will ruin you for life.
That's a whole different show, Chip.
No, but I mean, but that's the goal of the show, and to keep viewers in, there has to be this spark, and you can't spark with a positive communication, even with an earthbound, But my best friend, the one we're honoring because 40 years Wednesday, actually, because he put his emotions, his heart, his soul into my shoes so I could empathize with him. That kind of almost immediately taught me that that's what I would do in any situation that came up. So and I've been on a lot of paranormal things, I've gone to places that are haunted and all this stuff. And I've seen from some of the spirits that I've encountered that have been labeled as malicious and evil and stuff,
I'm glad you're bringing this up because we've talked about this. I think this is important, Chip, what you're talking about right now.
Well, the encounters that I had with them, because from my perspective, the first thing I say is, look, I can't see you, so forgive me. That's my fault. I'm just passing through. I'm not here to bother anybody. That said, if you can hear me and there's something that you'd like to say, I would love to hear it. It's disarming, first of all, and basically, forwards an unconditional acceptance. I'm here to listen if you want to talk. I have never had a negative encounter at any of these things, even with somebody they labeled shadow.
Speaking of shadow, are you comfortable? Are you comfortable talking about that? I was going to ask you. Are you comfortable?
We could go there eventually, but I just wanted to finish pointing out, a couple of things. One, in the basically in the survey from the professional mediums, the answer was, or at least alluded to, I can't tell you what it actually is, that let's say you have somebody in life that is known as a malicious liar or somebody who lies all the time, drama queen, borderline person, somebody that if you were to see her in spirit and she said something truthful, you wouldn't believe it was her. See? So in a situation like that, if she told a fib, that's an affirmation. That's like, okay, that's definitely her because, that's how I know her, right? Aside from that, There's an occasional tease, but it's usually meant with loving humor. But lies that are malicious enough to get a living person in trouble in a situation, very rare situation like the one this book describes, is extremely unlikely, especially if that's not the person in life.
We'll see. Okay.
I mean, look, and you were talking about how people in the afterlife do shift in certain ways, but that's over time, though. You know, my best buddy came to me once. You know, I mean, he did visit. Yeah, I still see him every once in a while. You know, see him more often than I see most living people. Really, you know. But
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, he was at my wedding. You know, I saw him. I saw him 2 days before my daughter was born. You know,
Aww.
Once he came to me and he told me, and this freaked me out for 5 years. I couldn't wrap my head around this until physics actually caught up to it, or at least on TV, and have it made sense. He said that he could visit me now, like he's doing. And in his tomorrow, even though there's really no such a thing, he could visit me 30 years ago. I'm like, what?
I just had that conversation with somebody last night, and we were talking about time, and I was talking about us needing, as human beings, needing time because of the way our lives are and this existence we live in. And that's exactly what I told them. I said, because what it was, and I won't give too much away because it was a private conversation, but there was a certain figure that's from the future out of a movie that freaks them out every time they see it. And there's something from way in the past that sort of had the same kind of head covering. And they were wondering, I actually ended up doing a past life reading. Okay. And part of it was this because of something that had happened in a past life? Or why would something that potentially could be from the future, is from a space movie, a character that's in there, something they wear, or what could it be? And I said it could be both. Right. I said because the past, the present, and the future are all occurring at the same time on the other side.
And think of it this way too. In addition to what my buddy told me, that you know, I mean, you ruined my brain for 5 years.
It always ruins my brain when I start trying to think about it.
He thinks of himself about the size of an atom and part of light. And, you know, light itself, you know, you take a photon, for example, it could travel out from this sun, you know, all the way across the universe in an instant, right? So he can go through all space and no time at all because it's at the speed of light. And at the speed of light, there is no time.
And once you go, be in many places at the same time.
Many places. Too. There was a movie, speaking of movies, that oddly somehow probably made best sense out of afterlife, and it was a Star Trek movie.
Love it.
Star Trek Generations. I'm not a big Trekkie fan, and I apologize to those of you.
I love Star Trek.
Look, I understand the lure of it. I'm just, you know, there are other things I'm more excited about personally, you know, as my heart's passion, you know, with these the paranormal, metaphysical, you know, extraterrestrial stuff. But I do get it. But it was called Generations, where Captain Kirk and Captain Picard actually met, right? But he's in this thing they call the Nexus. Captain Kirk was doing something for publicity for this new spaceship, and somehow it broke down or something hit it and ruined it. And he basically was, at least to the living, marked as dead or you know, or assumed dead at very least. But he's in this nexus. It's this like ribbon of energy that's flowing through this strange part of the universe. And somehow some guy who knows about it and basically is part of a crew on this ship, and he manipulates everything so this ship hits that nexus so they can all be there, you know? And basically this nexus represents death. I mean, it was just, but not really in the movie, but in life, you know, or just in my experiences. And here's Captain Picard, who comes across Captain Kirk. And Captain Kirk, at one point, he's cooking. 3 seconds later, he sees his dog from his childhood, you know. And he's got memories about his prom, and he's there, you know. All he has to do is think about it, and it moves in an instant. Because, again, if they're a part of light, if they go to the light, I mean, that's what they say, go to the light and become a part of light. There is no time, but in a way there is. It's just the way that the living people think about look, we've got a heart that beats twice a minute, boom, 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 or twice a second rather, boom, 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 120 beats per minute, basically, and for that reason, and culturally too, we are basically enslaved to time. There's a time to work. There's a time to eat. There's a time to sleep. There's a time to play. Oh, we better get there quickly because we want to be on time, and we don't know when our time is up. So for us, there's this urgency to do as much as we can because we don't know when it's over. So we got to find out stuff, and we got to find it out now. Yeah, that's the thing. But in the afterlife, there, without a beating heart, that urgency is gone. And there is a whole different feeling about time. If you have contact with a spirit and you try to say, meet me next Tuesday afternoon at 4,
you can't do that.
And then they agree 2 weeks from the following Saturday.
Be a year from now.
They show up, yeah, and because they think they're, but there is such a difference. But our understanding of time, culturally speaking, or at least as a species, it's all past, present, future. It's just this arrow of time, I mean, the past is behind us. The future is ahead of us. What matters is the moment. The moment is what we have. And we need to know stuff right now. And we need this, we need that. And all that's gone. But there is consciousness, though. And you talk to people who are physicists who are actually looking at it and finding ways to truly explain how it's possible. They see it not as energy or matter, but more like this quiet force, this hidden force, kind of almost a torsion energy, if you will, like this spiral that can slightly even manipulate the path of atoms or particles, things like that, but can also travel faster than light. There was an astronaut talking about the 50-year anniversary of the moon and all this Apollo stuff. There was an astronaut, sixth man to walk the moon, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, was actually did one of those ESP tests when they were rotating around the moon. And it takes, in light speed, it takes 30 seconds for the transmission from the base to the ship. But so this guy in the base is holding a card in front of him, wavy lines or a circle or a star, whatever. And here's Dr. Edgar Mitchell rotating around the moon, going circle, square. But he discovered while he was there, and I think he saw some things that changed him. I will say that. But he learned kind of in that moment, just in the way I learned in the moment 40 years ago, Wednesday, that, hey, that's going to be different than people think. He found that his telepathy is faster than light. Because,
what though, there's a good science. I gotta find this article. It's a science research. I was talking to Joe about it last week or the week before on his show. And
I love
science
Joe,
proving it.
I love Joe. I want to say that out loud a few times.
He's awesome.
Most fascinating guy on the planet.
Well, what I was going to say, though, speaking of telepathy, and they were proving it with science, and they had people that they took all their blood levels, their cortisol levels, they took everything, measured oxygen, whatever, and they taught them how to basically perform telepathy. And they started to measure it, like from one room to the next room, and then from one room to a hallway down, and then further and further. I think they got as far as 50 miles or 100 miles, and it was still the same results always. And of course, Joe and I got into quite a discussion, I think, about the fact that we weren't on the same page, I think, because he was talking about more telekinetic people being able to do stuff at a distance, like with
remote. Or remote viewing, where you can.
Well, remote viewing. That's what I was going to say. How do people do that? Like, you think about it, right? Actually, I just posted in my groups for those of you listening. I have 2 groups on Facebook: Paranormal University and the Angel Rocker Tribe.
Angel Rock, yeah.
And there's actually a remote viewer that teaches the program, and she's offering a 4-day webinar. So I posted both those groups on there for people if they want to sign up, because
I might do that.
Well, then Yeah, because well, what I did was our good friend Augie Nost
Sure.
and Nori Love, they
Love her
have
too.
a YouTube channel called Broadcast Team Alpha.
Oh, and with Tom Schaefer too, by the way.
And Tom, yes, Tom, I'm so sorry. Yes, shout out to Tom. And what they did was they had Russell Targ on there, the parapsychologist, as they described. I've looked him up to make sure I had the right title.
Mhm.
He is the guy that was heading the U.S. military teaching remote viewing, and he didn't have any interest other than being as from a scientific perspective, could listen to the interview.
Sure.
And he was the one that kind of taught the soldiers or the military how to do this, like how to spy basically from your seat. There's a movie out there called The Men Who Stare at Goats. It was kind of based on some of that. There's a brand new documentary that was coming out. It's already out now. It's called Third Eye Spies, and he's part of that. And they were also I think I don't know how much he gave away. I guess he couldn't give away too much because some of it was, well, most of it's been declassified, I think, because they say it doesn't exist anymore.
It's a tender thing. Well, yeah. And, you know, and the focus really is for the military. It's not about what you're doing. It's if you're doing it accurately, it's good for the military.
Well, it's good for other people use it for other things, because what I was going to add too was for those of you that have an iPhone, Russell Targ has a free app in there called the ESP Trainer, and he helps you to train with trials to be getting better at tuning in. He gets you to focus, like teaches you how to focus, go with your first gut instinct. The whole thing was really interesting, that whole perspective and piece of it. But like I said, it is possible. I believe it. I believe everybody has a sixth sense. I believe all children and babies have it. Between imaginary friends, or you watch a baby in a room, be sitting there laughing and giggling, looking like it's following something with its eyes. There's nothing there. And we say as we start to grow up and be told that that's imagination, that's foolishness, it's time to grow up.
Imaginary friends and all that stuff.
Yeah. But the other thing I like in it too is some people are natural born athletes. Some people are natural born mathematicians, business people, public speakers, whatever that, musicians. But does that not mean you can't learn another skill?
No.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, and when the people I work with is, when they come to me, the first thing they want to do, open the third eye. That's not the whole part to, using your sixth sense, if you will. It helps.
Right.
But I always say that, with a bit of practice, like you talked about meditation, things like that, it's possible. And if people don't believe it, how many times have you heard somebody say, I trust my gut. I'm going to follow my gut on that.
Well, sure. Well, here's the thing about the sixth sense that I just have to say. You think of us as a species, as modern Homo sapiens, at 60,000 years, as modern Homo sapiens, and a few thousand years before that, just Homo sapiens, and throughout a majority of our survival, we were in the food chain, right? So if you did not have this feeling in the pit of your gut that there's a nocturnal animal that's stalking you, right, which happens all the time, that we wouldn't be here to talk about it. The sixth sense is not just real, it's vital to our survival, But the whole thing that you were talking about with the third eye and wanted the third eye and this and that, the most important thing, I think, for folks, and I know there's a lot of people that feel they're on the cusp of it and it's just not happening, or maybe they just discovered a spirit guide and can't get the name of that spirit guide, or something that's somehow disillusioning them. Belief and intent are two of the most important things there. I don't think that anybody was really aware, because nobody's made us aware of the true power of our intent, especially if we understand the focus of our personal power.
Our thoughts, our words, and our emotions are three of the most powerful things out there. They really are. And intent, like you said, exactly.
Yeah.
And trusting, because most of us want to, when I first meet people, they want to brush it off as, that was coincidence, that was just my imagination. But you know what, if you really do start to pay attention to it, not force it, you can't force it, just got to go with the flow, relax. You will realize that, how many times has the phone rang and you didn't have caller ID way back when? You knew who was on the phone, or you knew who was at your door, or you knew something was going to happen before it happened, or or like I said, I always go back to modern days sayings of, I'm going to trust my gut. I'm going to
Hmm.
follow my gut.
Yeah.
Or you'll hear people say, I know it. I don't know why I know it, but I know it as sure as I know my own name, they'll say. That's clear cognizance. Like, you know it. You don't know why you know it, but you know
Yeah,
it.
but you know it, like it's a part of you, like it's the skin on your hand. It's that real, and yeah, and it's okay to recognize that. You know, look, there's a lot of people that try to dissuade us from believing in ourselves and believing in our personal power. The biggest roadblock that I've seen with people who are struggling with trying to increase their psychic ability,
Mhm.
it is a belief system. But
Yeah.
throughout most of their life, they've had a church or parents or cliques that they are a part of that say, well, that's evil. You shouldn't do that. It doesn't exist. You know,
Yep.
you're an idiot for trying this. And you know, those are hard voices to get rid of. And you
Yes.
have to. I mean, I'm on this path to ascension now. I'm going a little crazy with it because, you
I
know,
was trying to get you
really
to go
kind
there,
of,
but I didn't know how comfortable you were. Speaking of spirit guides,
yeah.
because there's one in particular that if you're comfortable sharing, I would love for you to give your perspective
I,
on.
I
And
I
that's
know
the
the one
smoke.
you're talking
The
about.
smoke.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It's the strangest thing, and yeah, I don't expect people to believe me on this, you know. But
Well,
for
I'm
some,
going to add something very quickly, Chip. If anybody's watching on YouTube, okay, and I don't usually see this with Chip when I speak on Skype. This is the second time this has happened. When we start to talk about spirits happening right now with Spirit Guide, your camera has been going in and out of focus. You've never had that before
oh,
talking.
yeah, there's just some. There's been a lot of energy
Yeah.
lately, and it's vibrant, and but it's extremely benevolent, divine, positive.
And I
Uh,
loved your perspective on this because we hear about this particular type of
all the
entity
time. Yeah, and
that it's
people will,
negative,
yeah,
but you,
people will, yeah. Okay, yeah, it's this black mist. All right. What you usually see, and I've seen sometimes on paranormal excursions, you know, when there's a lot of energy going on, or you know, you go to a place where it's just known you shouldn't be. You know, there are places like that, right?
I've had a black mist in my own house,
Mhm.
but so that's why I was so
Oh
fascinated
yeah,
by.
I had one in mine, you know, and it's I have this set up. There's a thing, and I don't like the term law of attraction. I just don't, so I apologize to anybody that does. I think the actual universal law of attraction is one thing, but it's misrepresented as if you just sit there on your couch and believe you've already got this job or you've already got this money, it'll just magically arrive. No, do the work, you know.
Mhm.
But the thing is, uh, look, uh, there was a time where this all really started. I had been in this accident. I was in a lot of pain. It changed my entire life, you know, and this thing is not going away. It gets worse as you get older. Nothing you can do about it, you know, just, but, you know, we'll help you the best we can type of thing. Have a nice life, right?
Yeah.
But they give you these medicines for pain, you know, and when you're on these medicines for pain, and the job finds out you're on these medicines for pain, there oftentimes there goes the job. Or hey, it's you know it's not Chip's a character. It's that's the drugs talking, right?
Mhm.
So there was a time where I asked my doctor to take me off of these things. They were very strong,
Mhm.
but I wanted to know how I could manage without them. So I wouldn't have all these questions about, am I stepping over boundaries because of these things? Am I a different personality because of these things? Do I think and act differently because of these things? And I had to have the answer to that, right?
With the medication, you mean? With
With the
these things, you mean
medication.
medication? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
And I agreed I was going to try it for a year, you know, because everything is a year in that kind of thing.
Yep.
And once the actual physical withdrawal all kind of ends, if it ever does really, um, I realized what my quality of life was. And I had no quality. I couldn't move. I
Yeah.
mean, it was overwhelming and extremely depressing. And you know what? I wanted to die. I did. I wasn't going to take myself out because, you know, I've got a wife and daughter, and they have to survive that. I couldn't do that. It was too selfish, I suppose. But I was praying for something, a cerebral hemorrhage or
anything that wasn't your fault.
Yeah. And I wasn't snapping out of this thing. And my saving grace ultimately was I started seeing and speaking with dead people. And that is something I never expected I could do. This whole thing with my best friend was different than that. And back in that day, you still couldn't talk about any of this stuff, but there was guys like John Edward, who I really looked up to on TV, and boy, he was impressive, Still somebody that I would love to have on as a guest or meet in life. That's one of the people really, Teal Swan was one of them. Yeah. And you can hear that here Saturday afternoon right here on UPRN, right around 2 in the afternoon.
Hey, you got to tell them about the smoke. Tell them about the smoke.
Yeah, okay.
That's
I got to get to the black mass. Well, first, I just wanted to say that these were earthbound spirits that I was seeing and speaking to. The ones that are portrayed on television as evil and out to get you and suck your life force and push you downstairs and ruin your life. And they said to me, you don't want to be us. You don't want this, They actually talked me, they actually snapped me out of it. And eventually, because I thought I was losing my mind, because I didn't think that, this was kind of anything having to do with me or my path or ability, they started telling me things about living people that I knew that they knew. Mm-hmm. So I could go to these living people and say, hey, did you have an uncle who died in a fire? He used to sell shoes. Yeah. Well, you know what? He said you had a job interview last week and thinks that job would be perfect for you. Mm-hmm. And the living person is like, how the hell did you know that? Right. Mm-hmm. So I got my affirmation, lost the friendship. He was great, but I got my affirmation. So at least I wasn't going crazy, And eventually I started doing it so well that I started telling my doctor about his aunt that used to make muffins for him that's around him sometimes. And the first thing he says is, I'm putting you back on the medicine. But I had relationships with these earthbound spirits. Some I eventually crossed into the light because I listened to them. And they were in situations where going into the light was against their belief system. They didn't think they were worthy of it. Some didn't know they were dead. Those were the hardest ones to deal with. I eventually crossed them over, but if you listen to them, this misery that they're wallowing in is not personal to you. They're not there to attack you if they're angry or sad or miserable or desolate. They're going to be that way regardless. However, with that said, if you are doing an investigation and do your homework and research, go to historical societies, or city halls to find something about the property, who lived there, who died there, get an idea of who might be there in spirit. And get a grasp of what time period they lived in, where the culture and the thought of things was completely different than it is now. I mean, almost violently different than it is now.
Well, there's a perspective to consider, too, because just because what we're seeing, how do we know that they're not really seeing that place looking like exactly it did, like what you said, like back in their time period? Maybe that looks just like the house they used to live in. Like, we don't know that.
Well, there's some cases where in this spirit's mind, you're the ghost. You know? He's there on a property that he built from the ground up, had to do soulless things in order to get the property in the first place and built the property. And it's his, damn it. So other people living there and moving stuff around might annoy him. Sometimes, the dysfunction of the living will actually almost create a situation where the spirits get angry enough and they start acting out. But most of the time, hang on. Okay. Most of the time, though, people misconstrue. Sometimes they walk through this pocket of what they feel is negative energy, because they're more sensitive than they realize, and they automatically say, oh, there's something bad here, right? Which kind of breaks the bridge from the get-go, right? I see so often how malice is misinterpreted as something else. I've seen situations where somebody kind of senses a spirit and says something out loud. And the spirit's like, oh my God, somebody can see me, because they might be in a place where it's still their life, but nobody's talking to them. You know, they can't see themselves in their reflection. Nobody's talking to them what's going on because they don't feel any different. You know, they don't know they're dead. Somebody speaks to them, even casually. Yeah, it feels like there's somebody here. And they're like, oh my God, somebody can see me. And that person disengages, right? Mm-hmm. And the spirit is almost like, hey, where you going, man? Where you going? Finally, finally. And they might throw something against the wall.
Well, I was going to say the same thing as you, Chip, is the fact that I've said often, you'll hear people when they move into a house, don't have any activity, might have a few little things, and all of a sudden they renovate. Mm-hmm. And then all heck breaks loose. And I said, you put yourself in that person's shoes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. It's their house. They don't realize they passed away, or they're staying with this house because it's their house. Like you said, blood, sweat, and tears. I'm not leaving this place. Right. And then all of a sudden you think about that. You're in your place or I'm in my place. And these people walk through the door. They can't hear you. They can't see you. And they start moving things. They start painting things. They start ripping down walls. What are you going to do? Make them stop? I know I go pretty far. They'd start small and might get pretty desperate sometimes. I'm not saying all spirits are like that, but it's something to consider, or the way we speak to the dead.
Every situation is different, and it depends on the living person's preconceptions, judgments, and belief systems, as it does the spirit's preconceptions, belief systems. Mm-hmm. You know, so I would, in that situation, at least try to compromise. You know, give them a room that's a shrine to them. You know, make it exactly how it was, so they're honored, so their memory is honored, and we could live as a collective and honor their wish and see if we can come to that bridge. Sometimes that just doesn't happen. You know, all sorts of different situations. But even with that said, my experience has taught me, again, to try to be unconditionally fascinated, supportive, see what happens. You know, if you're walking down the street and you see somebody who looks really angry, they're pacing back and forth, you know, and they're really angry, and you go up to them and say, dude, you all right, man? You know, anything I can do? You know, they're not going to push you down a flight of stairs or suck out your life force.
Some might.
Well, that's never happened to me, you know. Because
you got to remember, though, Chip, the same thing I wanted to point out to our listeners, that yes, you can try and deal with that. But what I'm thinking about even is some places that say there's been a lot of sadness, or there's been a lot of abuse, or a lot of anger. We're talking about a jail. We're talking about an asylum, whatever. Even when we're talking about energy as a collective, there's a lot of negative energy because of what happened in life.
Well, certainly there is. And well, let's take that situation. Okay, and let's take an asylum, for example. Let's use that as an example. And let's say people are going there, walking into this stuff with some sort of novelty-esque fascination. Ooh, I want to see if I can make something move. I want to see if I can tick something off. I want something for my camera. You know, well, that doesn't really help matters. Yeah, I've been in some of those places from time to time, but I've worked in nonprofits, you know, in situations that are similar to what these people had. You know, there are stigmas against, let's say, the epileptic in the 1900s, the mentally ill, you know, in just about every decade. You know, there is a stigma. It's not my backyard. You know, I don't want anybody like that in my backyard. And here are people that have this label that separates them from the rest of the community, and all they're really trying to do is find a way to assimilate, find a way to agree, find a way to compromise. And sometimes it's like that with spirit. I'll get to that black mist now because I think we've built up to it. Okay. Because here's this black mist with that, you know, look, I've been in investigations and I've seen it. Maybe sometimes on camera when I didn't see it, you know, actually happen. Sometimes I see it actually happen, you know. And because it's in a place that is known as being haunted, you know, somebody owns this place and has people come in with their equipment and look around because it's haunted. You know, they put that premise there, right? And most of the people are going to do things that mirror their beliefs. They may look for something bad because they think that's got to be what it is, you know. I try to do the opposite thing because I, again, never had a negative experience. These earthbound saved my life. Okay, these are portrayed on TV as horrible and awful, and these are the same kinds of. They were suicides, murder victims. I mean, well, at the time I was on their level. Desolate, desperate, sad. But they talked me out of it. They saved my life. So I saw that most of this energy is misrepresented, or
Chip, you haven't been to my house yet, and we're not bad people, and I'm talking on the same language as you are. So what I'm saying is, sometimes you're going to get stuff like that. There just is, and
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying it doesn't.
I guess that's the point I want to make. It still exists. I love what you're saying, and I support you 100% because I believe we should all treat spirit in any form, way, shape, or form, whether the living or unliving, with respect, with love, and kindness. Absolutely.
But this black mist, especially the one that I saw in my home, and I've got this set up. I've worked very hard. This whole Path to Ascension thing. I have spirit guides that I've learned over years are powerful. Some of them are related to divinity somehow. It seems a little grandiose for me, but there are things. Here's the thing that concerns me in life, in everyday life, is so often I see, especially on social media, well, my life sucks, and it sucked for a while. It's always one step forward, two steps back. I think there's some negative attachment that, spiritual attachment that's got me in this grip, or, there's got to be something demonic around me. And it takes your personal power and assesses it to something you can't see or prove. And the point of the whole thing is you give your personal power away, and it mirrors the things that you believe you'll see. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's got to be something bad here, and it won't stop until you actually experience or see something bad. So you've set that up. The thing about the black mist is, and what I learned from this black mist, it sounds a little crazy in my ascension path in my 5D
I found it fascinating, actually. I did. I found it fascinating.
It's still, I mean, I'm seeing some things on this path that are flirting with belief systems that I've had my entire life. Cultural systems, behavioral systems, systems of the divine, systems of time and space that I have to kind of amend in order to get a better grasp of this. There's something about this path, there's something about this flow. So it's part of this, my personal path is to defend and represent these earthbound spirits and crossed over spirits, so people won't automatically assume or accidentally surmise they're malicious, because most of the time they're not. And your situation, and I'm familiar with it. You're doing the best you can with it. Sometimes you can only try as hard as you can. I'll give you that. But I'm talking about people are learning from these TV shows that they're supposed to go into places and tick things off.
I agree. I have a problem with that too.
Yeah, but they're also, but it's also, and I don't like this law of attraction thing. It's you mirror what your self-fulfilling prophecy is, because that's a combination of your belief and intent. Because if it's a belief, it has to be right. So your intent makes it happen. It's called the self-fulfilling prophecy. This black mist is basically, to me, what's told to me, it's extraterrestrial. It's not from here. You've heard about 22 different species of extraterrestrials that are abducting people and doing genetic tests on them. This is something that wants to study our emotions, and they learn our emotions from extremes. So they go to extreme areas, especially known for ones that are extreme in dysfunction, where the living and the spirit energy is both dysfunctional and feeding each other. And this black mist will go there and basically snowball this so they can learn from it. But they also will appear in homes or places that are extremely loving.
And I'd never heard that before. That was the fascinating part. And that's the part that I loved, was because that's what we always hear. That it's so negative. It's so, whatever. I didn't ever have I'm never close-minded about these things because I often say, just because I haven't heard of it, I've told you this myself, just because I
Mhm.
haven't heard of it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And
Right.
I always have an open mind because you know what? Things I thought or believed even a couple of years ago are constantly changing and evolving
Constantly
with the more I
changing.
learn.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, me still. That now, Wednesday, 40 years into this, most of it on my own. You couldn't
Mhm.
talk about this stuff. So you weed out people. You find out who's good in paranormal, who knows parapsychology, who the good spirit mediums or psychics are. Because there's a lot of ones that are in it for money or wear these bells, books, candle, costume things that do all the talking for them, or try to manipulate you into another reading of some kind because they hook you in, they give you some sort of cliffhanger. And that misrepresents the real people who are doing good because they're
But I
out
think
there.
that happens with any profession
Well,
if
it
you think
is.
about it
Yeah,
though,
it
right?
does. It does. But
Mhm.
people don't talk about this profession that much,
That's true.
because a lot
That's
of people
true.
aren't in this
That's why we're
profession.
talking.
Yeah, it's talking shop.
So you said extraterrestrial. Did they tell
Yeah,
you where they might be from or what
I,
dimension
I
or?
I didn't ask because
Okay.
I think at the moment it's still beyond my grasp. There are things. It's just a strange place. See, in my belief system, my guides are so strong that nothing with negative intention
I
uh,
know.
that is interdimensional can enter this home, can enter my body, the body of my family, or anybody involved in this family. This is a protected home because part of my path is to understand the best of these things. And that's what I'm mirroring. And some of these things that seem to appearing, some are now extraterrestrial in nature. And I was not really an extraterrestrial guy for a while, mostly a paranormal guy, and parapsychology, I guess. You know, I kind of mixed on that because sometimes there are folks in that field that are always smarter than you are and want to make sure that you know that. And that's not good for teaching. But there are others that are fascinating. But they stick to the rules, the standard
I
model.
don't think there are any rules when it comes to this field. I really like there are some, I agree. Like, you're going to treat your spirits with respect. You should. I believe you always should, regardless of what you think it is or
Well,
what your preconceived notion is.
I like to do that with the living too. Do no harm.
You
It
just took the words out of my mouth. Exactly. There's some rules, but you know what? And Chip, you've heard me say this before too when we've chatted, is the more I open this door to the paranormal, the more infinitely smaller than a one-celled organism I feel when it comes to the vast amount of knowledge. Even
All right.
compared to real life, there's no comparison.
Oh, but that's because you're an Akashic girl now.
Oh yeah.
And there's a difference. Yeah. I've had those gates open. There was this exercise where you have yourself and then you visualize your guides in this meditation. And there's this pair of golden doors that has guards, and you appeal to the guards to open the doors. And that basically opens the gate to the Akasha, at least in this meditation that I tried. And sometimes I get a little and sometimes I don't. I've got more coming, I know that, but all good things in time for me, because I'm seeing and learning things that is on a specific path. I have this specific purpose. I'm here to defend those earthbound spirits. I'm also here to defend extraterrestrials who are not nasty and evil. And yes, there are some out there, but most of them aren't. Most of the contact, I'll go back to the Dr. Edgar Mitchell example.
Okay.
He did that telepathy exercise on the moon. When he came back, and I think he saw some things that we just never know about. Well, he died now, so I guess we'll never know. But there is a foundation that he started that's still running in his honor called the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Activities. They do a lot of near-death experiences and out-of-body
Wow.
experiences because they found in their study a considerable parallel to people who with near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and interdimensional contact, whether it's extraterrestrial, paranormal, even interdimensional things, fairies and angels and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So, but it's like life. I think the whole point is you know, I watch TV, right? I'm a pretty sensitive guy. I'm in pain all the time. So I don't want to see other people in pain. Sometimes I do. I like action movies and stuff sometimes, you know, but sometimes it physically hurts me to watch it. But it always physically hurts me to watch the reality shows that highlight mean-spiritedness, brash behavior, nasty behavior, because it seems to teach people over time, hey, if I'm a butthole, I could get a TV gig. You know?
I'm a butthole. No, I hear you. And you know what? I mean, I guess we'd be looking at utopia here, but the thing is, it would be so great that, you know, rather than having all bad news, wouldn't that be amazing? Probably wouldn't make any money, but having a good news network, so, you know, sharing good things that happen to people, or
you know,
awesome things, or
the irony of that is I probably wouldn't watch it either, you know, because it's we're
it's not
so
exciting.
used to. No,
so
we want to see that. We want to drive slow by that car wreck, you know. I mean, but that's our nature that now has become so cultural. You know, you go to movies, the anti-hero is the one you go to see, not the hero. Or if they have heroes, they're trying to kill each other, or they turn dark or something, you know. And you know, so it highlights negative things, bad behavior. Oh, you want the bad guy to win now, you know. But that's all it is, you know. The good guy never wins anymore. And now there are fewer and fewer examples for people to set ethical behavior, more moral behavior, compassionate, proper behavior. Just very fewer and fewer examples of that, because that's not fun. But the thing is, love-based side of life is half of what we have, and nobody's talking about it. And somebody has to. And look, when I started my show, Shameless Self-Promotion, Kindness Beyond the Veil, right here on UPRN, Saturday afternoons, 1 to 3 Central. And Teal Swan this coming Saturday, so that's a good one. It's because I noticed that people were walking around with their heads down, not because they had their phones in their hand, but because they felt very unsettled. It's hard to know what truth is anymore. It's hard to know what to say in a conversation without somebody acting out against you for it or trolling you for it. How dare you have that opinion? You know, and it's not. There's news and politics that are all opinions now that are guided to push you into feeling it personally, taking it personally, feeling it emotionally. It's bigger than a religion, and it's separating us. And that is not the way things are supposed to be. Yes, survival of the fittest worked, you know, 60,000 years ago.
Right.
But it's going to destroy this country, I think. And a lot of this extraterrestrial sightings, you know, contact that is actual, is because they're concerned that we're going to, you know, if we decide to have a nuclear war with somebody, or somebody decides to have it with us, or any countries decide to have it, it's not just going to destroy that area of this planet. It's going to radiate throughout. It's going to kind of put this divot in the solar system, in the universe. It's going to change the natural structure of things. It's unnatural. And so they're trying to prevent that. So in saying that, and because of this Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research, they call it the Free Foundation, that's the acronym. I'm really big on them because they've got a lot of astrophysicists and psychologists, and some of the people in paranormal that I thought weren't real. You know, they were these myths you heard about for years and years that are part of this thing. They actually did a survey of 4,000 people around the world, every corner, every area of the world, and they allowed them to talk about their either extraterrestrial encounter, or abduction, or whatever it was. Right. And found that no matter where in the world it was, the stories are very similar. That's one thing. But there's groups of stories, you know, because there are people that had abductions. There are people that think they're hybrids or are hybrids. There are people that, were used as breeders. There are people that have become spiritual masters, you know. I mean, it's a whole different thing. And yes, sure, there are things here that aren't in our best interest that might have been here before us that we're unaware of and don't want to see us here anymore. It's not like we're doing good to this place, you know, if you think about it. So they don't want to see us destroy this place and start to see it almost like the Matrix as a virus, you know. So, but there are also ones that are here to help kind of guide people toward the future, to look toward a more compassionate, benevolent way of living, because that's what they experience where they are, you know. So there's both. But this research showed, because it allowed people to be anonymous, so they could talk subjectively about their experiences.
Right.
And these are very detailed surveys. I mean, it's like 2 hours to 4 hours to take them, right?
Right.
And the results showed overall, 76% of the people surveyed, any job, any religious belief, any age, anywhere in the world, consider their experience, at least in the long run, as positive. You know, some of them had experiences where they were terrified or paralyzed, but healed. Yeah. So some people, you know, were more freaked out because these things were in their home and they thought they were burglars, you know, and that's part of the trauma that stuck with them. But everything else, you know, once they kind of can zoom away from that over time, is, you know what, it's not so bad. I feel more spiritual. I'm not afraid of death. I mean, people see things in different ways. 76% of all these people surveyed. And, you know, these are some of the most qualified people in the world that they have working on this. And Dr. Edgar Mitchell had this theory about consciousness as like this energy form, or a force, if you will, that we're just not aware of. That if it's faster than light, like telepathy, a lot of these extraterrestrial encounters, the language spoken was telepathic, right?
Yes, I'm aware of that. Yeah.
The person eventually understood what was said, even though, you know, the language, I think, is a bit over their head, but they got the gist of it at least. All right. And there's something about that telepathy that is different than everything else, but it's, you know, it's intergalactic, for God's sake, you know. So they're thinking that consciousness is not only universal, there may be more than one universe. And I'm not talking parallel universes. You know, I'm not I guess somebody talked me out of that. As I said, this universe would have to have started exactly the same way and have exactly all the same things done to it in every area of the entire universe, just so in this conversation, you'd be the one talking about this and I'd be listening. Yeah, it's like, come on now. But I think, you know, it is possible that we're not the only universe. I've come to think there are a few universes.
I don't think we have enough. We don't have enough time to get into that one. I've got lots of thoughts on that, I'll tell you.
But they're getting closer to finding scientific ways to actually map out how consciousness could exist as this subtle form. It's more of a force than actual matter, you know, but it can manipulate matter or move through matter. So consciousness could travel everywhere, like light. It could go faster than light. It's kind of that spooky action at a distance type of thing.
Well, the only thing I'm going to mention is for listeners, because we're almost out of time, we got just a few more minutes, is one person I will suggest to take a look at is Dolores Cannon. You can find a lot of her.
Yeah,
she's no longer alive. She's passed away in 2014. She's not a psychic. She's not a medium, not a scientist. What she is, she's a hypnotherapist. But she completely worked within the somnolence level or the omega level. But she said back 40 years ago, that was a no-no. She was kind of a pioneer in it.
Very ahead of her time, still to this day in many senses.
But what I was going to say, if you want to know a little bit more about what consciousness, or, you know, she's one interview I watched, and this lady didn't just hypnotize one or two people, and she talks about this when you're getting the same results from thousands and thousands of people. And she said when you work within that level, she said they become the person that you're reaching contact with. So say, and we all have many past lives. She said, for example, one person she was working with, I think they were 300 AD or something, and they were conversing, because you're able to still speak, but she said they used the same cadence, the same accent, whatever it was that they spoke back then. They gave you the name, but if they had no memory of the lifetime that they would be in, like you and I would be in right now if this happened to us. But what happened was she was trying to explain something with the word glass, like, you just look through the glass. They had no idea what glass was. They had no idea what a pen was, yet they use these things in everyday life. She's fascinating, but she also got a lot of information on consciousness and a lot of her stuff. Did you find that as well too, Chip?
I did. I haven't watched as many videos of her as you have. I've been familiar with her work through most of my looking into this,
Yeah.
But always seemed to, for one reason or other, be kind of parallel to the people that I was dealing with or meeting or talking to. But she was, so that she's still well ahead of her time. I have to, on this ascension path, come to terms with my past lives. I do past life regression hypnosis. I'm certified.
I know we didn't get a chance to talk about that. I thought about that. We didn't get enough time to talk about. We could talk for hours here.
I know, right? It feels like we've been here for 10 minutes.
So you still do that work, Chip?
I do, yeah. I've had a couple recently that had, not a couple, but a few people, I'll say, in my recent excursions, giving them past life regression hypnosis, that saw themselves in a past life as non-terrestrial.
Yeah.
Some sort of light being or some sort of humanoid type of figure that was, not from here. That's been recent. And that's striking to say that. But yeah, and in order to do it well, you have to have it done to you too, I've had a few of those. But in this ascension path, I do have to learn about some of these, and I've had a few. I learned and that I had one in the 1600s where I was there for a specific lesson that I failed to learn. So my next life was in the 1300s. Yeah. And more of a situation to learn whatever lesson that was. So it's not in, it's not in this straight arrow. You
have the choice, as I understand, because I've always been fascinated as well with children that remember past lives. And there's quite a few well-documented cases. Sure. You can find videos on YouTube or you can, and there's one child in particular that he passed away apparently during 9/11. And remembered falling from the building, remembered who he was. Wow. He has since, I guess, the family, like this little child, there was no way he could know that. They've been such wonderful parents. It must have been so difficult, but to connect him with his family that he remembered in his previous life. So sometimes people come back right away. Sometimes they don't come back for hundreds of years. It just depends.
Yeah. And sometimes they remember and sometimes they don't, And some of our primal instincts, the things that we have within us that haven't been taught or patterned on us that we still somehow have some of those, some natural fears. I absolutely believe are past life things,
Absolutely.
I've never been afraid of water until this one ocean that went from Buffalo to Canada. There was something about that water that just scared me to death. And I didn't understand what it was. And it's not that there was something evil there, but it was something about that bed of water that just, primal fear. And, so there was something.
Could have had a past life, but you know what, my friend, we are almost out of time. So you want to tell people where they can get a hold of you and your book and all that stuff, all that great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last name is a tough one to spell. But yeah, I'm on Facebook as Chip Reichenthal. It's R-E-I-C-H, like the Third Reich. It's a harsh comparison, but it is what it is. E-N-T-H-A-L. I do have a radio show right here on this network called Kindness Beyond the Veil. Really honored to be here at that. I love Joe Montalvo, too, the most fascinating guy in the world. So big shout out to him.
Yes.
Saturday afternoons. It's Central Time here on this network, so it's 1 to 3 Central, generally speaking. Sometimes it runs a little bit late, but in that area, in that time area. And next up, this coming Saturday, right here on UPRN, Teal Swan is my guest for Kindness Beyond the Veil. It's our 92nd episode. And, and it's a passion project for me. I do have the book out, Even the Dead Won't Tell You the Truth. You can find a Facebook page, even though I never really take care of it. can still find it, and it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's on Kindle too, on Amazon, and from Rowe Publishing, ROWEPUB.com. Even the dead won't tell you the truth. And pretty soon, I'm going to be back out again at events doing lectures on the kinder side of afterlife science and interdimensional communication. It's my passion project, and I'm working on a screenplay, but that's a whole different thing altogether.
We'll have you back again to talk about that. So I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us tonight. If you were listening, we had Chip Reichenthal, my very special guest and good friend. I'm Lorilei Potvin with the Angel Rock. If you would like to get a hold of me to book a paid psychic reading, healing session, mediumship
session. It's worth it. She's really, really good. It's my go-to, man. Yeah.
You can find me on Facebook under facebook.com/The Angel Rock. You can email me anytime at theangelrock1508@gmail.com if you got any questions, show ideas, guest ideas, or maybe you got a question for Spirit. As well as I have 2 active groups on Facebook, the Paranormal University and the Angel Rocker Tribe. Come send me an invitation. I'd love to have you join us. It's a great group of people. We got from all walks of life, all over the world. I also want to give a huge shout out to Joe Montaldo and UPRN for having me here this evening. I want all a beautiful evening. I will be back next Monday at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Derek White Sky Cloud.
Oh, awesome.
Shaman, medicine man, and he's got some interesting ET UFO stories. So stay tuned.
Yes.
To hear all about that. Thank you again. You have a beautiful week and much love and light. Right.
Right.